I wanted to love it. I really tried. Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Isabel and today's video is not what it was supposed to be because I just finished Cleopatra and Frankenstein and I have a lot of things to say. If you are like me, you spent a lot of your time looking online for your next big read. Well, Instagram convinced me that this was the book of the summer or the book for me to read right now. And because I am very obedient, I went in and I tried to be amazed by it. And it just didn't serve. I mean, we need to say that the cover is amazing. The cover art for this version and the other version are both magnificent, but the sad thing is that the best thing about this book is the cover and the title. Cleopatra and Frankenstein is a 2022 debut novel by Coco Mellors, and I really think that every aspect that integrates this novel together falls flat. And if you are very positive, this could only mean that we can expect an even better novel from this up-and-coming author. And I think that is where I want to direct this video review towards. There's not a hate video, but it is just so you can have an honest opinion, because everything that you find online is just how there is this amazing book. So what is this about? Cleopatra and Frankenstein follows a young British blonde artist woman that just moves to New York and she's trying to figure it out. She's a struggling artist. She has dealt with some depression in her life. Her mom committed suicide. She has a strained relationship with her dad. And one day, or more likely one night, she bumps into this one guy at a party, Frank, who is a middle-aged, successful man, and they both connect. And they spark, and after that first chapter, we realize that they get married so she can stay in the US with a student visa. New York in this story is depicted as poisonous and kind of dark in a way, but not too dark to get less than edgy and cool. It's just seen as this very fast-paced city, which is our setting. And the people that we have are divided in two types of people, really. We have the older but immature people who have found success while being creative, but still really act as they are lost or as if they are unwilling to grow up. And then we have our younger 20-something characters who are Cleo's friends, and they are all also in a creative sphere, but they're all struggling. They're all trying to find who they are, and they are very much entitled, if I might say so. I feel the main theme of this novel is self-indulgence. All of the characters that we meet are not really made for us to like them, which I think is totally fine, but also the way that their lives spiral and how their dynamics are these very toxic, powered relationships where the older people have the upper hand, but the younger people are conscious that they're being used. It is all very much raw and crude in that way. And everyone is aiming for what they want to do without actually doing much, if that makes sense. It's like things are just handed to this type of characters, and they all are very convinced of how self-important they are, how talented and special they are, and you feel like no one actually wants to put any work into achieving success, in that it's just happened to them. Going back to Cleo and Frank, they get married very quickly, and it is because of the student visa, but it's not really that much talked about afterwards. And the characters admit that Cleo could have married one of her friends if she wanted a visa so badly. So we do get to see them as lovers. And again, I am not a fan of this type of trope of like younger woman with older man, or just younger and older relationships because of the power imbalance. But this is what it plays off, and since the beginning you know that these characters are doomed and this love story is doomed. I feel like in this novel every character really pretends to be broke in both sense of the way. Like, they are broken people, but they also pretend to be broke. However, the only that carries anything or that is a provider is Frank, and he's also very generous with his money. I feel like they're the type of people who like to think that they're broke to be interested, but they still remain edgy and they still remain with a certain lifestyle when they don't actually have to go and get a job. So if you don't have a taste for privilege and this type of characters, maybe this is not a book for you, but just an FYI, because that is something so ingrained in the plot and the characters. characters. And speaking of the characters, from this brief plot summary, you can really tell that this is not plot driven. And that is fine. In this channel, we love novels that nothing happens. But I think that when you do have that, you either have to have good, interesting characters, not good morally, but interesting, well-written characters, and good writing, which go hand. Like, if you have good writing, you're gonna have a good character most of the times. But here I feel like there's a lot of room to grow, because not only the characters seem flat, cliche, and not rounded at all, they seem very two-dimensional. The writing, it sparks here and there as special. It's like something that you'd be like, oh, that's a really good phrase. But the dialogue is the only moments when you think this is flowing very well. I think that descriptions, the way the chapters are done, and the way the characters are written, they have really ups and down moments. It's not continuously good writing, and the characters never feel real. Cleo to me feels like the best character, maybe because it's also the character that we get the most descriptions from, because we are supposed to inhabit the mind of each character with every chapter that passes. So sometimes we are focalized through Cleo, sometimes through Frank, and sometimes to Quentin and people surrounding them, and they are thinking and talking and perceiving Cleo in different ways. So this fragmentation of her character really serves us well to get to know her, or at least to get to know what people think of her, because when we get to her, she is marked by the idea that no one really knows her and that people just use her as a commodity. They use her beauty, they use her presence, they use her accent, whatever it is that they can benefit from. And I think that in this way, the strategy of the fragmented personality that we get from all of the narrative voices, it's really good. Her relationship with Frank really brings more stability to her life, and I think that's something that she craves. She obviously have a lot of daddy issues and mommy issues, so she gravitates towards Frank as something that is going to like pull her down on earth. But Frank is also dealing with his own alcoholism, and he kind of has this anger issues as well. So they're clearly not a good match. We know since the beginning, but we also don't see Cleo really growing up. Towards the end, the big plot twist that takes her from the situation is just handed to her, like as an escape route. Even though we do get that she doesn't feel self-aware of being alone anymore, or she has go back to her art and everything, it still doesn't feel like she grew a lot. It just feels like this is the Cleo we met. She had a downward spiral, and then she comes back to kind of the Cleo we met before. So I don't feel a lot of growth. It's kind of just going back to the way things were. With Frank, I think he manages to be an antagonistic character because of Cleo, and because you really, at least I relate to Cleo more than to Frank. But he's not unlikable, which I think is a highlight of the way that his character is built, because he is funny, he is generous, he cares about his sister. So we get all these redeeming qualities from him while he is an antagonistic figure. But at the same time, there is no growth in him at all at the end. When he without giving spoilers, after Cleo and Frank kind of split up and he gets a new partner, the new partner is the one that tells him, you should go and take care of Cleo, you should talk to her. And he only does it because the other person says it. He doesn't think of Cleo as his responsibility anymore, or thinks that she's only financially dependent on him. And when Cleo talks to him and he says this, she even says that. She's like, of course it's not about me. Of course he couldn't stop drinking for me, but he did for her. He couldn't come here because of me, but he did it because she asked. So again, Frank has the opportunity, and it would have been very easy and noble of him to be like that and care for her out of his own feelings of responsibility. But no, it's just because his new partner said it would be nice. And he's like, yes, she makes me a better person, which is also the sick notion that the book handles, that you cannot be a good person on your own, or you cannot grow on your own. It always is because of the influence of someone else. And this make me feel that these characters couldn't survive on their own in a different story. And that's why they also don't feel independent or realistic in a way, because you cannot even imagine them without all of this constellation of people and setting. At the same time, when you get to Cleo and she's away from all of these people, she also feels like that person without a body, almost as if she's just existing, as if here being uprooted from New York and this group of people, now she is just like soul without a body and without anything else that defined her before, if it makes sense. And it's the same thing with Frank. And speaking of Frank, his new partner, Eleanor takes a big part towards the end of the novel. And you would think that is a good thing that she and Cleo are, and they're not pitting against each other, but it is very clear that she is written as the anti. For us as readers of this book, she is very enjoyable because she observes a lot of things. I think that the chapters that we are in Eleanor's mind are the most interesting and the most experimental when talking about writing, because those chapters are clearly distinctive from the other character points of view. She has very short and snappy observations of everything around her. We never see long paragraphs or inner monologue or long description. It's almost like fragmentary within the fragmentary structure of the novel. However, we are the only ones that know this. We are the only ones that know how special Eleanor is. And Frank's attraction to her is not that it's not understandable, but we missed a lot of the, or at least I felt that I missed a lot of the spark between Eleanor and Frank, like the one that was with Frank and Cleo, that we got from the dialogue, that they would have perceived as well. But with Eleanor, she is just the anti-Cleo, and she is seen as the only healthy person. And for Frank to be healthy, he has to be with Eleanor. He cannot just get healthy on his own. And that's also another critique that I felt like these characters are just toxic and poisonous. Then why do we think that Eleanor deserves to be with this type of man? So these are our main characters whatsoever, there's three, and I feel like none of them have like a spine. They just latch onto each other and they just float around. Their major character development traits are not even because they took an active role in deciding what they're gonna do in their life, but they're just something came up and something just magically happened. Other than these characters, we have like Zoe and Quentin. Zoe is Frank's sister, who was an interesting character with an interesting plot line, let's say, because she is a very spoiled, privileged girl, but her journey of her self-discovery and her own sexuality and pleasure is interesting, but it is obscure by how annoying of a person she is. I think she is our most privileged character. She is always complaining that she doesn't have money and feeling bad that she sees her brother as like an ATM machine. But she's always complaining that her mother mismanaged money, that Frank married Cleo so she cannot have money anymore, instead of just making her own money. And she's like, well, I'm an artist, I'm an actor, but we also don't see her looking for acting gigs or being extra passionate about it. She just kind of, when talking about acting, she just says that it's a way to inhabit someone else's life. So you see that it's more of an escape for her than an actual passion. And then Quentin is Cleo's best friend. And I think that Quentin is the biggest missed opportunity of the whole novel. We meet him as Cleo's gay best friend. Again, cliches all over the place. And he likes dressing up with female clothing, and he has a partner, but then they break up and he gets to another relationship with a drug addict, and he goes into this drug journey. And then his plotline is dropped. We were in his mind for several chapters and we saw so much rage, so much sadness, so much self-hatred. And then we just hear that he has become addicted to meth or heroin. I don't remember right now. And it's just dropped. I feel like that is the main problem of this book. This book tries to be edgy and cool and dark, but only when it's cool enough, only when it's glittery enough and it's like fashionable. But when we actually go to the gruesome, dark details that could have been with Quentin's life, he's just dropped. Cleo says, well, yeah, I tried helping him, but he doesn't want help. I understand that because Cleo is showing that there is just a certain moment when you can help an addict, but then if they don't want to be helped, you have to think about your own. But what about the author? What about Mellors? She abandoned her character too. Like, we could have seen Quentin's after being abandoned and just anything happening with him, but he was just dropped because he wasn't fashionable enough. He was actually in dark things, not edgy for being cool things. So I feel like overall the characters don't really escape the cliches that they're spawned off. And I feel like all characters in some way in every form of media comes from a cliche. We're gonna have a girl who's an ingenue, but then we're gonna add some to it. So she has some actual human characteristics and she's not a cartoon. But these characters, that redeeming qualities that they have, or the things that make them more human, also make them more uninteresting and less human in some way. It's like they don't exist. They don't exist. They are obnoxious. The contempt that they exude with, well, I was mistreated as a child and therefore this is who I am and I plan on never changing unless I don't know, I latch on someone who needs me to change, then I change. It's just, I'm over it. I think that is a big fail, and I think the novel type of structure that relies so much on the characters' points of views and having really bad characters like this is not attractive, and it's tiresome, and it makes you want to stop reading. So I kind of already talked about the structure, but just to make it clear, the structure is a multi-narrative type of book. That is to say, each chapter is vocalized through a different narrator. We start with Cleo and Frank, we close with Cleo and Frank. They're the main couple and the main storyline, but we do get to see Cleo's friends and Frank's friends and all of these other things going around them. But the problem is that when we introduce, for example, Zoe and Quentin and Santiago, anyone, they all have their own plot lines that towards the end are kind of dropped. Like Quentin's, they get too much apparently, and they, if anything, they get a closing remark or a wink towards the end, but they don't really matter. Another problem with this type of structure in the book is that you need to really master the skill to give different voices to each narrator. I felt like every narrator, with the exception of Eleanor, was either Frank or Cleo. It is understandable when you start a book, when you start a chapter, you know a few characters and you're a bit all over the place thinking, well, who's speaking here? However, that happens a whole novel because it feels flat. It feels like it's the same voice. It doesn't feel particularly independent. Like the identity of each character doesn't like go through the page and you understand this is Quentin, this is Zoe, this is Cleo. They are all kind of the same. As I said, Eleanor has a more experimental and particular voice, and that is the only one that makes it clear since the beginning that you are reading an Eleanor chapter. I think that it might look interesting and easy, but as a narrative structure, this type of multiple narrators is a structure that requires a lot of skill, and that it just works for certain types of stories, and it definitely did not work for this one. As I said, most of the stories that we inhabit, their individual chapters are dropped towards the middle and end of the story. And something that happens when you have novels with multiple narrators is that usually all of these threads close together tightly towards the end, and they make sense. And even though the other characters don't know everything you know, because you are the one that's gathering all of these stories, it makes sense. It has a purpose. It all comes together at the end and it closes. But here, Cleo and Frank close, but then the other ones are kind of floating around. And maybe that was intentional to keep as maybe we get a book about Zoe one day, or maybe we get this, or just to signal more of a reality type of style that things never get closed all at the same time. But to me, it felt almost very late. Again, a lot of the missed opportunities, like with Quentin, that was dropped when things were getting real, is what we keep seeing in Cleopatra and Frankenstein. And it's a shame. This novel pretends to be edgy, pretends to be raw, pretends to be relatable, but once you peek through the curtain and you peek through the facade and you see how it maintains that kind of plasticky, artificial idea as I am super real and edgy, then you can never look back. And as Quentin put it when he was talking about Cleo, he was so sure that she and girls like him, straight liberal girls, would actually be quite disgusted with him and his actual dark side, even though Cleo and Frank talk about having a dark side all the time. And Mellors' abandonment of a character like Quentin in his storyline kind of proves his point. We are too afraid to go into the real, but we all want to be real and we all want to be edgy. And I think that this novel leaves you with a bad taste because of how it pretends to be something that is clearly not. Now, something that caught my attention when I was browsing for some reviews and criticism of this novel when I finished is the Sunday Times that said, "Move over, Sally Rooney. This is the hottest new book." And as you know, this is a Sally Rooney stan channel. We love her here. I need to say first that I don't like comparing authors like this. It is unprofessional, it is reductive to the author's talents, and is mostly unproductive. But I will indulge just this one time to break down my disillusions when seeing people recommending this book, of saying, oh, if you like Sally Rooney, then you like this book, or saying that it is within this line. If you're on the internet, you know that there's this sad girls type of subgenre that people like to put Sally Rooney and this novel together. And I understand it is attractive to compare Sally Rooney's conversations with friends, with Cleopatra and Frankenstein, because we do have that same younger girls or young girl with older people, and the power of relationships, experience versus innocence, and just all of that. I understand that, but that's about it. Sally Rooney is very experimental with her own writing. Her characters are very self-aware of their privileges, especially at Normal People and Beautiful World, Where Are You? It's definitely that. But they are self-aware of their privilege and their wealth, and we have characters who are not wealthy and who are not privileged in the same ways that bring that up all the time. So you do see that even though they represent a certain type of person, they are aware that they don't live in this bubble. They're also both debut novels from young female artists, and I know that people like to clump all of those attributes together, but it is not as simple. It is not even fair for Mellors to be compared to Sally Rooney. Sally Rooney's best asset, I believe, is her prose, as is experimental and is always on point. What happens with Coco Mellors is that she has those highlight points. For example, the first chapter that is very witty, fast-paced, almost like an opening of a movie, or just magical, ethereal, quirky beginning. And then we have some of even that. But it's not as steady as a Sally Rooney novel, and it is only experimental when it's inhabiting Eleanor specifically, because all of the things that she listens and that she perceives are very interesting, but it is a character trait. And as I said, the first chapter of Cleopatra and Frankenstein, if you read it, that really grabs you in, but then it loses you. And it loses you and it makes you want to keep reading because you think that the electricity is gonna come back, but it mostly is like that first chapter is the most workshopped one, the best crafted one. Now, I've also seen comparisons with Modern Lovers by Emma Straub, which is also a novel I read when it came out. And I understand that they compare it to that because it's a novel with multiple narrative points of view. The problem is that that novel really does a great job at making it all come together towards the end. Since the beginning, we know where the novel is going. All the narrative points are well crafted and well knit together towards the end, which is something that we don't get here, as I already said. And it is unfair, I think, because it might be that Mellors wanted it to be more open than this type of narrative like Modern Lovers, but by comparing it, you see Cleopatra and Frankenstein as deficient. Modern Lovers also did amazing in giving each character their own voice. So there was a moment towards the end of the book that you didn't even have to think twice when you already knew who was narrating that chapter, and that never happens in Cleopatra and Frankenstein. Maybe it's not a loss of skill, but maybe it's also just that Mellors is not there yet, which is fine. But by comparing her so early on with Straub and Rooney, it just affects her as an up-and-coming writer. And it also affects you as a reader who are looking for an honest review of a book similar or not even similar to that, but it gives you a misconception of what this novel is going to be like. I believe the LA Times nailed it when they called Cleopatra and Frankenstein something that is made for television. And it's not an insult, it's just how you feel it is. As I said, the first chapter with its witty dialogue, electricness. It is the beginning of a perfect coming of age movie, a show. I think a show of this will be really interesting because each chapter could be focused on just one character and that kind of getting together towards the end, but not that really. It will be better as a show than as a book. And I know that we're not allowed to say that, and it sounds like an insult, but it really isn't. It's just how it feels like it's conceived as. Like with its easy two-dimensional characters, the witty, digestible quotes, and the dialogue, and how everyone is so attractive and their lifestyle. It is made for television, and there's nothing to be ashamed of. And I hope we do get an adaptation because I would watch even though I didn't love the book. It could be entertaining television of an underwhelming book. And isn't that better than when they pick a really good book and they give us a crappy adaptation? And thinking possibly everything in this book feels like engineered for Instagram and for the vibes. And that's how I've seen reviews. They say, this is for the vibes. Maybe I'm not in the vibe. Maybe I don't want this type of books anymore. But this is you. And after all I've said, you think, okay, I'm gonna go for it. Go for it. It's not crappy. It's not trash. It just has a lot of room for improvement. And I think that if you scrap all those comparisons to other novels, you could actually enjoy it and not have a misconception of what this novel is. But I do feel that this novel thinks that it's something that it's not. I think that the best things that Mellors gave us was dialogue, Offred, the first chapter, which is coincidentally when our two main characters fall in love and they're the most vulnerable and they're the most magical selves. She was good at that. She was good at falling at the human connection, at the romance. When everything was kind of falling to pieces, it just felt like something that you have read and read many times before already. It didn't feel fresh or original. So it's a shame the novel was preoccupied trying to be cool instead of trying to be true to the author itself or what it was its best at. For this and more, I gave Cleopatra and Frankenstein 3 stars. I thought that the title was cute, the idea was okay, dialogue was great, but it just didn't hit the mark. It made me want to abandon it multiple times. I had to start it twice because I was just not feeling it. And I think that the most damaging part were those reviews, those comparisons to other books, and just how everyone was raving about it online. So I wanted to bring you an honest review, not just hate and negativity, but objectively why I think so. And if you are still interested, go for it. Remember, this is just personal preference. And thank you for watching. So keep reading, and when you're not, follow me on all my social media, link down below. I am Isabel, and I will be seeing you very soon. Bye!